शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये व्यासाय विष्णुरूपाय व्यासरूपाय विष्णवे नमो वै ब्रह्मनिधये वासिष्ठाय नमो नमः यस्य स्मरणमात्रेण जन्मसंसारबन्धनात् विमुच्यते नमस्तस्मै विष्णवे प्रभविष्णवे Om Namo Venkateshaya. Pranams to everybody. Let's move on to the next nama. We have seen up to Saptavahanaha. Next is amūrti. Amūrti prakrita deha rahitaha. That means one who doesn't have this murti means form. One who doesn't have amūrti means who doesn't have the form like all of us. All of us have got this form because of this panchabhutas. Bhagavan's Sariram is not made up of this panchabhutas and therefore is called as amūrti. Sthūla bhautika mūrtihi vyavrataha ityartaha. That means the same thing is not made up of this panchabhuta and therefore is called as amūrti. Other meaning of mūrti is Bhagavan's nirguṇa form. That means the saguna form is one form of worship of Bhagavan. The other is nirguṇa. That means without any form and therefore is called as amūrti. Anagaha agam dukkham papam cha dvayam asyana vidyate iti anagaha. That means one who doesn't have this sins. That means the papam. And dukkham, that means sorrow. He doesn't have any of this and also he doesn't have any blemishes and therefore he is called as anagaha. Anagaha papa shunyaha. That means he is without any sins. All we have sins because we don't follow on the path of dharma. The sins accrue to us, whereas Bhagavan is always dharma himself and therefore there is no question of any papa to Bhagavan and therefore he is called as anagaha. Akarmavasyatvena tan magna jiva vilakshanaha anagaha. That means one who is not taking this body because of karmas or these vasanas, but is taking it out of his sankalpa for re-establishing dharma and therefore none of these karmas get accrued to him and therefore is called as anagaha. Achintyaha. That means one is beyond comprehension. That is, one is beyond the mind and intellect, who cannot be conceived in the mind itself, the concept of God or Bhagavan, and therefore is called as achintyaha. Other means muktopayam api durnirupa achintyaha. That means one who cannot be, we can understand something, there is an upama. Upama means there is something equal unto that, then we can understand. Because in nirupama, that means Bhagavan doesn't have anybody who is equal to him also, and therefore very difficult for one to conceive or understand through the intellectual logic, and therefore is called as achintyaha. That other meaning is pramadi sakshitvena sarva pramana gocharatvat achintyaha. That means one is beyond all this, this logic and then all this sakshi and beyond all this, pramanam, and therefore is called as achintyaha. Bhayakṛd. Bhaktanam bhayam krantiti bhayakṛd. So one is able to remove the fear of his devotees and therefore is called as bhayakṛd. Other meaning is one who is able to create fear in the minds of people who are not following the path of dharma and therefore is called as bhayakṛd. That is one meaning. In fact, if you look at, we saw that the example of this Ajamila in the initially, the next Trinama is bhayanāśana. One who is able to destroy the fear of his devotee. He first creates the fear and then he destroys it also. In the case of, this Ajamila, the example is very apt in the sense that, he initially got frightened on seeing this Yamadutas and therefore he called out his son Narayana. Then once the name of Narayana was called, first he created the fear in him and then subsequently when the Narayana name was called out, then the Vishnu Dutas came, fought with the Yamadutas and removed this, this pasha from the noose from his neck, and therefore then his fear was completely smashed. Bhayanāśanaha. So bhayakṛd-bhayanāśanaha. So initially he tries to create the fear for the people who are falling on the path of adharma. Then once they come onto the path of dharma, then he removes all this fear and therefore is called as bhayanāśanaha. We move on to the next Slokha. aṇur-bṛhat-kṛśas sthūlo guṇabhṛn nirguṇo mahān adridasvadridasvasyak prāgvam shovam shavardhanaha anuhu bṛhat kṛśah sthūlah guṇabhṛt nirguṇah mahān adritaha svadritaha svasyah prāgvamshaha. Anuhu. So one is like a very smaller than the atom. Anu, the Upanishad says anoho aniyan mahato mahiyan. He is smaller than the atom and bigger than the biggest, so simultaneously. So that's why he's called as Anuhu. He is even smaller than, because even if you look at, even take a tiny ant, In the tiny head there is a Jivatma, and in the Jivatma Bhagavan exists. So that means he's even smaller than the atom. That's what it is. At the same time, he is inside in even he is present in the Akasha, also in the Antaryami, and therefore he is bigger than biggest also. So he can be present in both places, like the space. No, the space is a good example. Space is present even in is the smallest of the small thing, because it is present inside in even the smaller things. At the same time, it is the biggest because it is holding everything within himself, and therefore the space is also the example can be given as space, while we try to understand smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest. Anuhu. Other meaning is Anutva Vishranti Adhikaranatvat Anuhu. That means because being the small, one who is he becomes the residing, he is the person who resides in everything, and therefore he is called as Anuhu. Of course, Parasara Bhatta refers to all these things as the Ashtama Siddhigal. Ashtama Siddhigal, you got the Anima, Garima, Lahima, Prakamyam, so many, the Ashta Siddhigal, and therefore Bhagavan is also the source of this Ashtama Siddhi, and therefore he is called as Anima. Anima is making oneself as the smallest, and therefore he is called as Anima. So Bhagavan is the source of this Ashtama Siddhi, and therefore is called as Anuhu. Bṛhat means is the exactly opposite of that. Bṛhatvatvat Brahmanatvacha Brahma. That means one is very big, and one is also got a very great honor and great thing, and therefore is called as Bṛhat. So Bhagavan is greater than greatest. That's what it is. I told you, like he is beyond the sky also, greater than the space himself, and therefore is called as Bṛhat. Other Parasara Bhatta refers to the Bhagavan's Mahima Shakti. That is, Anima is smaller, Mahima is becoming, taking the biggest form. That's what it is called as, Bṛhat. So by like Anjaneya Murti had this, this Ashtama Siddhigal. So he was trying to become very small when he went into that this Rakshasi's, this mouth, and then came out of her here. So he could take such a small form. Similarly, in front of this, this Lankini, he took such a huge form. He could take such a big form also. So that is the Ashtama Siddhigal, Bṛhat. Other meaning is Bṛhat Gunaihi Vriddha. That means one is complete, big, because of his various Kalyana Gunas, and therefore he is called as Bṛhat. The next is Krishah. Drishachavat Pratishedat Krishah. That means one who cannot be seen through the naked eyes, and therefore is called as Krishah. Other meaning is one who is like it can be very light also. Light like this cotton as such. So that is other Ashtama Siddhi. Kanima, Mahima, Lahima. Lagima means being very light, and therefore is called as Krishaha. Daityan Karshayati iti Krishaha. That means one is able to destroy the various, this Asuras, and therefore is called as Krishaha. Sthūlaha, opposite of Krishaha. That means very heavy. Sthūlo Mahaparimanam, it's very big, very fat, and all those things. So it is very heavy. Sthūlaha. Garima, that's what is the other Ashtama Siddhi. Sthūla iti upacharyate sarvatmakatvat. That means one is one who can take the biggest form, like when he moved from the Vamana to the Trivikrama, he was such a huge form, transcending the three worlds as such, and therefore he is called as Sthūlaha. guṇabhṛt. That means one is the supporter of these various gunas. That means one is, this, as I told you, the Bhagavan himself says in Gita, Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratya. That means the Maya is made up of these three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And Bhagavan is the supporter of this Maya, and therefore he is the supporting it, and therefore he is called as guṇabhṛt. One is the supporter of this various Maya. Nirguṇah. Vasuto guṇabhṛhat nirguṇo. That means at the same time, he doesn't, none of these gunas, although he is the supporter of this Maya, and through that the Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, but Bhagavan doesn't have any of these three gunas. He is without all this Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. He is beyond the three gunas, and therefore he is called as nirguṇah. Sattvadi guna rahitatvat nirguṇa. That means one who doesn't have these various three gunas, and therefore he is called as nirguṇah. Mahān is Sreshta. One is a great person, and therefore is called as Mahān. So this Parasara Bhatta says this is also one of the Ashtama Siddhigal, like one who can walk across the walk around on the water, then he can get into the sea, go deep into the sea, into this bhumi, and therefore he can come out of it at whatever time he wants. So those are all the qualities called as Mahān, and therefore as one of the Ashtama Siddhis Bhagavan can exhibit, and therefore is called as Mahān. I think we'll stop with that.